Hi everyone, my name's John McKeever from Data Migrators. Thanks for joining us again for another video on Metal CI and DataStage NextGen. Today we're going to be focusing on showing you a practical demonstration of how you can put together a CI/CD pipeline for your DataStage NextGen installation. And what we'll show you today is compatible with both DataStage NextGen self-hosted or DataStage SaaS running under IBM Cloud. I'm joined by my colleague Drew Nuttall-Smith, a senior developer on Metal CI. And Drew will show you something at the command line very shortly, but I just want to introduce you quickly to what Drew will be showing you. So Metal CI, if you don't know about it, encompasses a number of capabilities for both DataStage 11.7 and DataStage NextGen, kind of capability enhancements, particularly around automated unit testing for data stage assets, both static testing, where you're looking at the design of jobs and flows and identifying anti-patterns, whether they're security or maintainability or performance related, and also dynamic testing, where you're taking a flow, injecting test data, and checking that the output is what you're expecting. You can do that for DataStage 11.7, as I said, and you can build and do those for DataStage NextGen as well. You build and test your jobs interactively using the user interfaces, but you can also script automate the re-execution of those tests as part of your CI/CD pipeline. To do that in DataStage Classic, you'd use the metal CI command. For DataStage NextGen, the NextGen equivalent is called MCIX. One of the commands we provide with MCIX is a DataStage export command. And this is used with the Git interface, the Git command line interface, to provide a Git bridge, a bridge between DataStage NextGen, the repository, and your Git system. There is an interface into Git built into the DataStage user interface, the DataStage NextGen user interface, but there are a number of challenges with the current implementation of that interface. And also, it's only available for DataStage software. There is no current Git interface for DataStage NextGen, and I am under the impression that there's a number of there is some rework going on around the Git interface that may lead to some changes in that imminently. So the interim solution that we're proposing that customers use, at least until that Git interface is released, is the system you're going to see today. So Drew, shall I hand off to you and you'll show us how to get DataStage NextGen assets into Git?
Sure thing.
And
So,
then what that will do is that will trigger a CI/CD pipeline in Azure DevOps, which is what we're going to be using today. And then I'll jump on and show you how that pipeline was constructed. Over to you,
yeah,
Drew.
thank you. Yeah, so as John said, we'll just do a little quick demo, get a high level overview, get things very concrete before stepping back and seeing how we got to that point. So, just to introduce the moving parts, what you see now is a project in DataStage NextGen. This is acting as our development project. We've got a number of assets already in here. We have a second project here, which is acting as our CI project, which only has one asset, which is a connection asset. And as you can see by the name, this is here to be used for our test data when running Metal CI unit tests. And it's configured as such here under Manage Data Stage Test Cases. Then we've got a Git repository within Azure. And as you can see, there's a number of directories and files already in here. We're not going to get into the detail of that in this video. There will be other subsequent videos and documentation that can dive into the detail of each of these things. But notably, we don't have any of our data stage assets in this repository yet. So we're going to do an initial commit here as part of this demonstration and show you what that looks like. And then when we do that, this will trigger off a pipeline to run. So I'm going to take a step out onto my command line where I have an install of the MCIX tool that John introduced you to. And what we're going to do is we're going to run a data stage export command, which will export all of our assets from that development project. And I'm going to point it to my local clone of that Git repository that we were just looking at here. So I'm going to export directly over the top of here into a subdirectory called DataStage, and then I can commit those assets from here into the repository and run my pipeline. So if I come back here and I just do this, here's a command that I prepared earlier. So you can see it's the MCIX DataStage export command, and I'll just quickly go over the parameters that I've provided for it. We've got the URL of our CP4D instance, the base URL, the name of our project, user name and API key, and then the export path. And as I said before, this is pointing to the DataStage directory inside of my local clone of the Git repository. So MCIX provides a number of commands, but this is the only one we're going to be running here manually today. And we've got documentation to take you through the nitty-gritty of this. But if I run this now, it'll take a sec. You see, it'll connect to CP4D and export that project. And once that's finished, we can see those assets having appeared in our Git repository. You can see all of that succeeded. So now if I go over to my local clone, you can see the DataStage directory has now been created. And within that, you can see the directory for all the different asset types that have just been exported. So if I run git status, now I can run git add that directory and git status again. You can see all of these assets that have been added, and I'm going to commit them just with a simple message initial commit. Now I can do git push. Okay, so all of my assets from my development project have now been committed into my Git repository. Now we'll jump over back to Azure, where we can see that our pipeline should have been automatically triggered to run. So if I refresh this, you can see the DataStage directory has been committed. And now if I go over to pipelines, initial commit, we've triggered a run. So on this home page for that pipeline execution, you can see we're presented with this graph that shows us a high-level overview of our pipeline. Now this is kind of what we consider to be our standard default pipeline, but each customer is different. Everyone's pipeline needs are subtly different. So yours, we have examples that you can take that look exactly like this, but then after that you can take those and configure them to your specific needs. You can see the first thing we do is deploy to our CI project that you saw before. So we saw there was only one connection asset in that project, and once this step has completed, we will see all of those assets that we've just exported from development environment will be in that project. After that, we run tests in CI. So these are the unit tests and the static analysis tests that John briefly described before. If all of those tests should succeed, then we can go ahead and deploy those changes to our further downstream environments. In this case, John, I believe we don't have any manual gates configured for any of these environments, but as you know, it would be most likely in a production scenario that you would automatically deploy to CI, but probably have a manual gate for each of your environments. Beyond that, it's just easier for the demo if we just let it run through, but that can be configured to your specific needs. So if I click into this step, you can see we get a lower level detail of what's being executed, and we can see the logs for everything that's running here. Oh, we see that's finished now, but we don't need to go into that level of detail at this point, just showing you that that's there should you be interested. We can see deploy CI has gone green, and we see where it says 99.2% test pass. Azure just shows that based on if something's been skipped because it ran in a previous time but wasn't needed to run this time, it won't show 100%, but it's green, which means everything passed. So if I go to my CI project now, see latest updates, you can see we have all of those assets here now. So that's successful. So now we just need to wait and see the result of our testing phase. So if I go to pipelines, that's all in progress. You can see we have two stages of asset analysis tests. and one stage of unit tests. Okay, we're seeing some results come through now. So this stage that's still running, asset analysis CI warn, we've set this up for tests that you want that you don't necessarily think should fail the build, but might be useful information for some work that you might want to do down the line. So perhaps you might have performance rules in there where you're like, the functionality is going to be fine, there's no security risk, but we could make some improvements later. The ones under fatal, are ones where we say, if it doesn't pass this rule, we're going to fail the build. And you can see that's happened here. So if I click into that and click down here to the step that's failed, you can see there's a couple ways to get there, but you can see here I can click this link to go to the published tests. And you can see one rule has failed. This is the asset, LD daily sales summary. And the rule was hard-coded DB credentials. So we've said in this asset there was some database credentials that were hard-coded, and we believe that should fail the build and prevent these changes being deployed downstream. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go back to development, fix that problem, and we're going to commit just those changes and run this through again.
Drew, can I just jump in before you move on?
Please
Can
do.
You just click on the test case there?
Click here.
Yeah, I think it's worthwhile just highlighting.
Oh, yes, of course. Good. Yeah. Yes. So you can see here some further detail about that. So you can see we've got a hard-coded database, hard-coded port number, username, and password. So those are the problems. It tells you specifically where in the job. It tells me the stage name as well that I need to look for to fix these problems. Now, the list of rules that we run as part of asset analysis, again, we have a bunch of example rules that we provide to you, and it's up to you to choose which ones are relevant to you. And some of them you can configure to your specific needs. You can write your own if you're very enthusiastic. It's entirely up to you. This is just an example set that we're running here. So if I go back, so it's LD sales summary, ODBC daily sales summary is the stage. So in my dev project, it's conveniently right at the top. So if I click into that, you can see this is the stage that we would point it to. As you can see, all of my database credentials are hard-coded in here, and we're saying we should use an external connection asset. So if I click here, change it to this connection, apply, and save that change. Now, I'm going to go back to my command line and commit that change. So if I go here, just get rid of that. Oh, come on. Why won't, there we go. Okay, now if I just run that exact same command again, let's wait for that to finish. There is a new version of this command that exists, but it's just waiting on an API being available that will only export the specific assets that have changed. This exact version I'm demonstrating now exports everything, but you'll see because we've exported over the top of our local Git repository, if I run git status, I can just see what's changed here. We do get this one test case showing up as changed, but that's just because of the nature of the way that's in a zip format and the way that's created. It's not going to be exactly the same in the binary format every time. But what I can do is just copy that one flow that I've changed, add that file, and you can see that's worked. And now I'll commit that and push. So fixed hard-coded DB credentials. And push that change. All right. Back to Azure. Now if I refresh, you can see that commits come through. And if I go back to, how do I get back there? Is it runs? No. How do I get back to, is it under pipelines? Is here where I want to go?
Yeah, back to pipelines, that's it. You're in test plans at the moment.
Oh, there we are. Great. There we go. You can see that's running. So what we should see here, the deploy step should complete as it did the last time. but the test CI stage should go completely green, and then the subsequent deploy steps will run after that. So other than waiting for that to finish, that's pretty much it for the live demo now. As we said, there's a lot of information there, but we just wanted to make it a little more concrete so you know what we're talking about, as John now goes back and shows you how we got here, how this was set up, and how you can do the same.
So Drew started with the MCIX command, and there are a whole bunch of different options for MCIX. And here you're looking at some prototype documentation, which is what we provide to IBM as part of the MCIX package. And if we have a look at the documentation for the DataStage namespace, Drew ran a DataStage export. You'll be able to look at the documentation, see the syntax diagrams, as well as the descriptions of all of the parameters. And here you can see the example of the command line usage. So this was the one Drew ran. Let's have a look at something that might be used as part of a CI/CD pipeline. So the first thing you're going to do in a CI/CD pipeline is to take that code base in Git and deploy it to a testing environment. So deployment would involve running overlays that Drew touched on, running an import, and then running a compile. So let's just have a look at an import. Here's the DataStage import command that MCIX provides. Again, a description of its command line usage, but you'll also notice we provide an example GitHub action and Azure DevOps task. So these are native operations you can use in your CI/CD pipeline to invoke MCIX functionality. Any users of Metal CI on DataStage 11.7 will be accustomed to the structure that you would have needed to put in place to do CI/CD on DataStage 11.7. Because some of the essential components of DataStage deployment, namely the compilation process, were baked into the Windows tier, it meant that to do CI/CD on 11.7, you needed a dedicated Windows host with the Windows tier installed on it, a runner from your CI/CD system to represent your CI/CD system on that host, and the Metal CI command. So you had infrastructure to set up, storage to create, holes in your firewall to establish. And that was the minimum necessary to do CI/CD on 11.7. For DataStage NextGen, whether you're hosting DataStage yourself or whether you're using SaaS, all of those obstacles are gone. That's because of the architecture of DataStage NextGen and what MCIX brings to that. So the MCIX command is available for your CI/CD solution as a container. So here's an example where we show the MCIX command and its associated plugins baked into the MCIX container hosted on the IBM registry, or it will be very, very shortly. We're in the process of working with IBM on that. So the IBM container registry, icr.io, will contain the MCIX container. And then your CI/CD pipeline, let's take at the bottom here, as we're looking at today, Azure DevOps, you'll have your CI/CD pipeline definition stored in the repository as a YAML file. And that will, when it's instantiated at runtime, that will be read by the Azure DevOps runner running on the Azure environment. And it will see references to that container and pull that container in at runtime. And then it will use a set of Azure DevOps native tasks to invoke functionality provided by the MCIX command within that container. Okay, it might sound a little bit abstract, but you'll see an example when we have a look at the pipeline. Those Azure DevOps tasks are freely available tasks in the Azure DevOps marketplace. So if I just have a look at I've just gone to the entry here, but if I just go to the Visual Studio Marketplace, you can go here today and find this and type in DataStage, for example. I can find an extension for Azure DevOps, the Metal CI, MCIX DevOps for IBM DataStage NextGen. We wanted to make sure we got all the keywords in there so that it was as discoverable as possible. And this is the layer over the container that basically defines a set of native capabilities for your Azure DevOps pipelines. So this means that rather than in your Azure DevOps pipelines, rather than saying putting big long Docker run commands and managing all of that yourself and connecting to the registry and pulling and all of that stuff, you can literally just say natively, I want a job, and the step in the job is DataStage import or overlay apply or DataStage compile or run a unit test, whatever it might be. So you literally say, here's the task, here are the parameters. And all of these tasks are defined here in the documentation for the extension. You will install this extension in your organization. So you can say, get it for free. Okay, and so this is presenting me with my with a dialog enabling me to install the extension in my organization. I've actually got two organizations, Data Migrators, which is kind of like behind the scenes development, and Metal CI, which is front of house publishing stuff to the world. I've actually got this extension already installed in those organizations, but you would literally just click the install button that would appear here. And then that means any repositories within your organization have access now to those Metal CI MCIX based tasks. If you're running a locally hosted version of Azure DevOps, so Azure DevOps server hosted in your organization, you can click the download button and download the extension, install that into your organization, and that will again at runtime go and reach into the IBM container registry and pull that container down. So let's go and have a look at a pipeline. So as Drew alluded to, we've got this pipelines directory, and here's our pipeline definition in YAML. And you can see we've got some variables set up, and down here, some examples of the Metal CI MCIX tasks. So here's an asset analysis task, okay, which is the non-fatal static code analysis with all the parameters provided. You can see there's lots of comments and documentation in this pipeline, and this pipeline you've seen executed today is actually shipped to you in an example repository that we provide. This is actually the example repository, the Azure NextGen template. So you get a copy of this, you get access to this, and as Drew mentioned again, this is not prescriptive at all. This is just an example of a typical canonical CI/CD pipeline that an organization must use. You can take this, use it as a template for your own solution, adopt pieces of it, adopt all of it. You choose, adopt different parts of it at different rates. There's nothing prescriptive about it at all. Let's just go back in and have a look at the pipeline. This is the one, I think, is this the most recent run? There we go. Yeah, this is the most recent run. And as Drew mentioned, we didn't have any environmental constraints placed on this. So it's just deployed, 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 deployed. But normally you would have approval gates on here. Stakeholders would receive notifications and come and have to approve the subsequent deployments.
But we can see that compliant asset analysis test, has passed. And then the deployments downstream occurred, whereas the first run it failed, and then the downstream environments were not deployed to.
There we go. Yeah. So Drew's demo has worked. And again, these environments you're seeing here, CI is going to be fairly obvious, but the choice of QA, perf, and prod was arbitrary. We just chose some typical kind of environment names. You may have fewer or more environments than that. Totally up to you. Not prescriptive at all. If we go and have a look at the pipeline itself, let's say I wanted to edit this pipeline definition, and I'm not really going to make some edits, but I'm editing the pipeline definition, the YAML file, and you'll notice here over on the right-hand side, we've got all of the native tasks to which we have an entitlement. And so because I've installed that extension in my organization, I can now type DataStage and get actually, I'll put MCIX to get everything. MCIX, these are all the native tasks that I've got access to. So let's say if I wanted to run a unit test, I'd click on that. It would then give me a form I would fill in with all of the various values I would need to provide. In many cases, these will actually be, or I would recommend that they are secrets. If they are sensitive, sorry, not secrets, variables, in most cases, and for the sensitive values like API keys, secrets. So you would define those in your Azure DevOps environment. Each of these parameters, you don't need to go back to the documentation because that same description is provided here on the little info buttons. There's a JUnit report file entry, a test suite name for your reporting. The only thing that you should know is that the connection between your Azure DevOps environment and that IBM container registry needs to be defined through a service connection. I think probably if you're looking at this, then you're almost certainly an Azure DevOps customer already, and you probably know what a service connection is. But if I quickly jump in there, I look at the project settings here, and I go to my service connections. Here, you can see I've defined ACR Docker Metal CI, and that's a Docker registry service connection that points to the location of my container. At the moment, I'm actually hosting that container in Azure's container registry because as I said, we're in the process of getting that into the IBM container registry.
Do you want to just quickly touch on the version of the command? Because I saw there was an option in that form there.
Thank you. Yeah, very good point. In fact, yeah, I'll do that. I'll just bring that option up again. So let's say deploy. Okay. Yeah, down at where was it? The container
top.
Yeah, there we go. So the default version for this technical preview of the MCIX tasks is set to latest. When it goes live, when you have access to this, and when we get to a point very soon where we recommend you start using this for production CI/CD solutions, that won't be latest. Latest means that you're going to use the very, very latest bleeding edge version of the MCIX command inside the very latest bleeding edge version of the MCIX container. And that means that things can change underneath without warning. Okay. What you should do is you should pin this to a nominated version like version 1. Then as we keep on working on stuff and release it to latest for our own consumption, at some point we will say, okay, we now have a stable release 2. Maybe there's been changes to DataStage NextGen that we need to align with, or we're adding new functionality that we need to release. At some point, we'll release a new version of the container with a new version of MCIX command inside it. We'll baseline that at release 2. You will see that on the release notes for the container on that Visual Studio Marketplace entry there. You'll see that along with the release notes. You will then perform your due diligence to say, yep, okay, we're now good. I'm going to now go to version 2 of the container image. So yeah, very good point, Drew. Thank you very much. So that is the easiest way for you to build a CI/CD pipeline on Azure DevOps, talking to DataStage NextGen. As DataStage NextGen evolves, so does MCIX command, and the container that wraps it and the tasks that use it will be maintained as well. If you need advice, you can contact us, inquiries@datamigrators.com. If you're an IBMer, we're available on the IBM Slack channels. I'll pop those up on the screen. Drew, anything else we forgot?
I don't think so.
I think we're good. Well, thanks everyone for your attention. Do stay in touch. Keep an eye on this channel. We'll be updating it with new and exciting stuff over the next few months. My colleague Justin and I will be at every IBM Think event and every IBM Tech Exchange event. And in fact, Drew on the call will be, cross fingers, talking at this year's Tech Exchange event as well. So we'll hopefully see some of you there in person. Thanks, everyone. See you soon.